So let's begin. I want to start with Philip Zimbardo. He's pointed out what he calls the demise of guys. He says guys are just not what they used to be. They are 30% more likely to drop out of school than girls. Girls are outperforming guys at all levels of education. 2/3 of students in remedial programs are boys. They're 5 times more likely to get ADD than girls. They have a fear of intimacy, he says. As a sociologist, he's talking about how there's this social awkwardness among young men today, especially with the opposite sex. They don't quite know how to conduct themselves. They don't know the language of facial contact, of body language. These kinds of things are beginning to be lost upon a generation that is so plugged in to the cyber world. And he identifies that as the cause. Zimbardo says excessive internet use, video gaming, and pornography are the reason that our young men are really falling by the wayside today and losing what it means to be a man. And this is not even coming from a Christian point of view. He calls them arousal addictions: internet use, gaming, porn. It's not like a normal addiction. A normal addiction, you want more of the substance that you're addicted to. An alcoholic needs more alcohol. A cigarette smoker needs more nicotine. But a gaming addict, a user of games and pornography, needs something new and different and exciting, something novel. That's why he calls it arousal addiction. There's always got to be a different kind of experience. Now, those of us who are not gamers, we're totally befuddled, we're totally baffled by the idea that people can sit there and play video games for hours on end. We don't get it. I want to help you understand the gamer. I want you to know why there is such a draw to gaming so that we can begin to empathize with them a little bit and diagnose what the problem is with these games. The first thing is, in all of these, you'll see they are seeking things that we're supposed to be getting in the real world. They are seeking them in the game, okay? First one, community and belonging. There's an MMO statement from Niels Clark here in Gaming Addiction where he says this is the kind of thing you'll hear in your community, in your video game world. You'll hear this kind of thing. You got to be at the raid on Sunday. You're unbelievable. Like somebody's thinking about not attending the raid with his fellow players in the game. We just gave you the black breastplate of unholy raging fireballs. If you take that and leave, then I'll come to your house and kill you. Now we look at that and we would laugh and we'd be like, what? These people are mad. This is an actual kind of conversation that takes place in the gaming world. You saw on the previous slide, the previous statement at the top, this is a persistent world. The massively multiplayer online game is always on. The world is always going. You don't just turn it on like we used to with Nintendo. Excuse me, with Nintendo. The world is happening, and whether you're there or not, so you're missing out. You've got to be there. There's this guild mentality where your community, your clan, your guild needs you to be there. And if you're not there, if you think about quitting, oh, don't even think about that. You'll get tremendous abuse thrown at you from these people. It's like going to a bar and telling people you're thinking about giving up alcohol with your drinking buddies. That's not a good idea. Well, we also see a second need that is fulfilled. The first was community and belonging in these guilds, in this community in the game. Secondly, achievement. You get this sort of power, this status, this feeling of accomplishment through gaming in this hyper-competitive world where you're acquiring wealth, you're acquiring rank, you're acquiring gold and armor and magic spells and you name it, weapons, and so that you can take all of these things on your quests and go defeat the dragons and the demons and the bad guys and all of these things. So begins to be an illusion of manhood, especially with the young men. Girls too, I get into the gaming too, but there's this heroic conquest of masculinity pursuing things in the gaming world without the risks that a career and a relationship and being a father and these things that are a little hard. You can go into the game, you can get the feeling of being a hero. In fact, they did a study and they found that actually less than 25% of massively multiplayer online role-playing gamers, less than 25% of them actually feel better about themselves while they're playing. So it's a momentary feeling of achievement, but you don't actually feel good about yourself deeply in studies they've shown. Here's a quote from Niels Clark. He says, "Good games provide the illusion that a player's accomplishments were insurmountable feats, the stuff of poetry and legend, when in fact, every one of the player's successes and victories were planned. The game was designed by a game designer. They planned for you to have that victory. It's all an illusion." On the matter of achievement, we read from Kevin Roberts, "Although we have trouble organizing our bedrooms and closets or keeping track of important papers, we successfully manage entire economic systems in our games. We gloss over many crucial details in our real lives, yet exhibit laser-like concentration on our electronic battlegrounds. We are the stars, the geniuses, the saviors of our cyber universe." Achievement, and it's all a fraud. A third one is escape. Kevin Roberts, in his counseling of many different gaming addicts, has found a trend that is woven through nearly every person he's counseled, that they're escaping something from their life. They're avoiding something in their life. There's a real issue there that they are escaping. And that's a sad thing that counseling really can heal. A fourth one, a fourth reason that there's such a draw to gaming is role-playing. There's this online persona that you can form. I don't necessarily like being who I am in the real world. I don't feel like I'm cool, like I'm pretty, like in the case of a girl, like I'm accomplishing things. But in the game, I can be somebody. I can find purpose and identity in being this guy in the game. And you know, we used to just read about heroes or watch them on movies. In this case, you can actually be the hero. You know, somebody who might feel like a loser can go into the game and feel like a hero. And in fact, the video games tap into this in their advertisements. The PlayStation ad says, "I live a double life. I set morality aside." And another video game ad says, "Live the life you've always dreamed of, without any risk or danger to yourself." Indeed, role-playing is huge in the gaming world. Another thing is aggression. It's a release of aggression and also a reinforcement of aggression. One study showed that hostility was increased both in subjects playing a highly aggressive video game and those playing a mildly aggressive video game. Subjects who had played a highly aggressive game were significantly more anxious than other subjects. So in other words, the more aggression the game has, the more anxious you'll be. But it doesn't matter if it's highly or mildly aggressive, you will have more feelings of hostility after you play these games. And also we found that the latest brain research shows that violent games activate the anger center of the teenage brain while dampening the brain's conscience. So that's a very serious consequence when we go into the game because we may have feelings of anger and we just want to go blow some people away in Modern Warfare or Call of Duty or whatever. Another thing, competition. There's this I'm better than you dynamic. There's this I'm going to beat you principle that started with Lucifer in heaven when he said, I will ascend the throne and be like the Most High. The competitive spirit of being on top of somebody else is big in the gaming world. It's a human need that we feel we have because we're fallen creatures. Next, a discovery. There are discovery-oriented gamers who love to explore. They're curious. They like to explore every inch of territory in the game. And there's hidden things, there's tricks, there's cheats. And the discovery-oriented gamer just gets immersed in that for hours on end and misses out on discovery in the real world. Another thing is just straight pleasure. There's an ad for a video game that said, the prospective buyers of this video game can satisfy primal urges using real-life choice scenarios that are so immoral I won't even mention them. I'll mention one that's not as bad as some of the others. In the advertisement it says, "Meet the woman of your dreams and introduce her to your wife." That's in an ad for a video game. So there's a lot of immoral pleasures happening in the video game, and that's part of the draw to the video gaming. Here's a quote from Niels Clark. "The in-game play, the in-game shopping, the in-game sex," you didn't know that was in there, did you? "If it can be put together in a way that's somehow more pleasing, we might assume that designers will try to meet that mark." So the game designers are trying to create a world that's immensely pleasurable and sinful for that matter. The last draw to gaming is the story aspect. When you go into the game world, it's not just playing a game. It's not just trying to do things physically with the guy on the screen. You're actually going through a storyline in the games. And really, in our real existence, in reality, there is a great story that we are a part of, isn't there? We are called to be on a great quest for the Lord. And what we're doing is we get into this counterfeit story in the game. But we have this human sense, this human need that we know that there's a story, but we get diverted onto a false one. And that's really what's happening, especially in the role-playing games. The role-playing games are surpassing the novels as the best character development storytelling in our culture today. And it's just another distraction from the one true story. A little plug for the seminar that we're going to be doing later called The One True Story, taking people through reality, the history of reality, from God in heaven, creation of angels, the fall of Lucifer, the fall of mankind and earth, the story of redemption, and how God will wrap it all up in the end. we need to really understand the story we really live in. beltoftruthministries.com will put that out as soon as we get it done. But these gamers, they get immersed in that story, and it's just so captivating to them. And it's hard to convince somebody otherwise. I want to talk for just a moment about this other world. J.R.R. Tolkien, a fantasy novel writer, explained that you can actually craft and build and create a, quote, secondary world. As a fantasy novel writer, people can step into your fantasy world that you've dreamed up, that you've created, and they can actually believe in it. They can actually find themselves there in reality. And he explained that the beauty of this, in his view, I think this is all a distortion of reality, and it's a counterfeit reality, but he said the beauty of this is you don't need to force people to suspend their disbelief in the fantasy. They just fall into it. And he also said that through what he called enchantment, that's a term from spiritualism, you can, quote, enter into a dream that another mind is weaving. That sounds creepy to me, actually. And he says it was a literally magical thing. And he said also that the creator of this secondary world, the writer of this novel, the creator of this game, is following in the footsteps of the creator God. Now, I don't believe that we should be like the Creator God in that sense. We should be like Him in character, forgiving, merciful, etc. But the devil, when he said, I want to be like God, he really wanted the position of God. When he said, I will be like the Most High, in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, he wanted to be in that role. He wanted to be in the seat of God. God is the creator of one reality. He created one world for us to live within, one universe to live within. And if I go and invent a fantasy reality, I'm trying to usurp the role of God in that position, to immerse somebody else into a counterfeit reality. Niels Clark explains that, and he's been in this world, recovering video game addict, it casts a spell on us, he says. Literally, there's something spiritual going on, and we'll come back to that later. But I want to quote again Niels Clark, because he says this regarding the story concept. Imagine that your favorite story could go on forever. Then imagine that you are the main character. Now imagine that you can choose between thousands of these stories. In essence, that you can pick a never-ending story that's just right for you. This is what sophisticated games are. A place where we, you and me, control the story and plot for ourselves. And it's not just Niels Clark. Other experts talk about how we suspend this disbelief in reality. This is Steven Pinker, a psychologist. He says the visual system never learns that television, or a screen for a video game for that matter, is a pane of glowing phosphor dots. And the person never loses the illusion that there is a world behind the pane. So he's saying the visual system, when you're watching the game, when you're watching the TV, you might be able to explain to somebody that, of course, this is not real. But the visual system doesn't know it's not real. You're experiencing as if it is real. Like we saw with the monkeys when they looked at the peanuts. What you see, you're experiencing as if it is your reality. Another expert on this, Iowa State, says what happens is that people often suspend disbelief and immerse themselves cognitively in the environment. Avid gamers will tell you that they, in a sense, become one with the environment. And that is the big word, immersion. To immerse yourself in that world is how gamers talk about that. I totally got immersed into the game. This is how you can spend hours on the game, in the game world, is by immersion. Let's talk a little bit more about it, because it's not just a game. The human body, this is very real to the human body. It can release a variety of chemicals responding to games as though they were a completely real physical experience. Visually, images seem to have the ability to immerse and enchant us, with or without our permission. These are media that give real experiences to our real eyes, ears, hearts, and brains. Experiences that professionals painstakingly design to be fun, breathtaking, and exhilarating. So you're in this world and you feel that it's real. That's how you can stay in it so long. It's a real experience for your body. In fact, Kevin Roberts says that the strongly addicted player relates to this online world as the real world, and as his or her other life is just a necessary evil. So video gaming is not just a distraction. Like TV is a distraction, silly novels, whatever. You're distracted from real life. No. It's not just a distraction. You actually become the character. You don't just observe the character on TV. You are the character. And so you're in this world, and it's a different world. It's not just a distraction from the real world. It's a replacement for the real world. That's why it can be so immersive. And so this is how a gamer feels on the left versus the right. Which one's more dynamic? Which one's more attractive? Reality begins to become boring. You know, when it used to be a fantasy novel, this was more difficult to do with text, to immerse somebody into a fantasy world, reading about dragons and elves and all sorts of nonsense. It's hard to really get somebody immersed with text, but with visual images, it happens instantly. You know, brilliantly crafted words can do it, but there's nothing like a visual experience in the video game world. So what happens? The video game world's so dynamic, so capturing, so immersive. The real world becomes then boring. Here's how Niels Clark put it. These places, the video game world, where you're immersed in this place, it's in direct competition with the rest of reality. Most of the entertainment we've had in human history gives us natural breaking points. The chapter ends, the film ends, or there's a commercial break. Most games are set up to be played for long periods of time. It's built into the fabric of the gamer culture. It's encouraged by game marketing. And there aren't enough good stopping points in most games for people to stop, look at the clock, and realize that it's time to sleep. This will then dull the taste for reality. And the mediocrity of reality seems like torture by comparison. Doesn't that little boy look just excited to be in school? It's torture compared to the being in the game. Reality is just so dull. It's so boring. It's so unrewarding. In fact, they found, speaking of this issue of immersion and immersing yourself into the game, Nottingham Trent University and Stockholm University did a research where they discovered game transfer phenomenon. They found that players in a virtual world were beginning to blur the lines between the game and reality once they came out of the game. In other words, they started doing things in the real world as if they were still in the game. Now, you might be thinking at this point about mass shooters, about these young people, many of which are gamers. Is there a connection there? I believe so. Now, that's not to say every gamer is going to become a mass shooter, but it sure isn't helping. And these mass shooters happen to be gamers. So if there were no games, we may not have ended up with those mass shootings. So let's look even deeper into this, because they call it portals to another world. Like most addicts, says Kevin Roberts, we hide our behavior. We consider our bedroom a holy place. We want to be alone and uninterrupted while indulging in our obsession. The game console and the social network interface are portals to another world. When you talk to us or the phone rings, we are forced to come back to the real world. We find that irritating. We neither desire to see your face nor hear your voice when we are in that virtual space. From our perspective, any interruption is an extreme violation. We want you to stay away. And I know there are many mothers in America whose young sons, teenage sons especially, immersing themselves in the game world in tears over the fact that their child wants them to stay away. It's such a horrendous interruption. He's addicted. We're going to talk more of overcoming addictions in session 6. Stick around for that and how to deal with this. But I ask the question, is game even a meaningful word to use with these new worlds that have been created? Game developers actually create the worlds in which people live. And in that way, they have close to godlike powers. The game designer has created a new world. It's not just a game anymore. And remember, the visual system and the body experiences it as if it is reality. It's a counterfeit reality, an alternate reality. But it's not just the game designer that has godlike powers. Think about also the player of the game. In God games, players delight in controlling growth, development, and evolution, and any fan of a God game enjoys the opportunity to exert complete dominance over the people and places in the game. There's also a false picture of God hidden in that too, as if God is a God controlling and orchestrating and manipulating and intervening in all matters, as if we are puppets on a string. So the God game player gets to control all of these things, and then we also get an ungodly picture of God. But it's not just the God games or the game developers that have godlike powers. Think about just the regular run-of-the-mill game. Our minds are set free to explore and experience heightened abilities and senses in a space that still looks and feels real. Games take our senses beyond the confines of reality. At the same time, those sensations also allow the inflation and extension of our consciousness, unique ways of being. You will be like God, said the devil to Eve. The extension of your consciousness, a unique way of being. If that isn't spiritualist sounding, I don't know what is. So the player of any game is acquiring powers that you can't have in the real world, that the devil is offering to people through the video game today.